Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. Your host, JP John Poz. With me today, very special guest, film producer, author. God, he does everything kind of in the wrestling business, in and around the wrestling business. He is Mr. Evan Ginzburg. Evan, welcome in. How you doing?
Thanks so much. Great to be on, John.
What is going on in your world? I know now officially you've got the new book coming out, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. Tell us all about the new book.
Yes, during COVID, I sat down and wrote 100+ stories about juggling my careers, one in the wrestling business as an agent, and various other roles. I've done heel managing and publicist on various major conventions, etc., so on, play-by-play, a little of everything. The only thing I haven't really done is take bumps. I also juggled teaching and film producing, including I was associate producer on The Wrestler and 350 Days, the wrestling documentary.
The Wrestler, man, one of the best movies, well, especially that year, but probably Mickey Rourke's best movie. Just what a great movie that was. What was that like to be a part of that?
It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I had booked Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkov for an autograph appearance as their agent, and was sitting in this wrestling store in Queens, New York. And all of a sudden, the executive producer, people get a little confused with these titles. Executive producer is the money guy, the guy who raises the money for a film. Scott Franklin, the executive producer's best buddy, walks in and he starts chatting with us, likable guy. And he's like, Darren Aronofsky is doing a movie on pro wrestling. Do you know Darren? I said, I'm a big fan. I've seen all his films. I'm a film buff. And we start talking, and the guys, we exchange business cards. I don't hear anything for a good 6 months and almost forget about it entirely. All of a sudden, the phone rings, and next thing I know, I'm sitting in a meeting I bring Nikolai Volkov, Johnny Valiant, Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts up in Calgary, and Nikita Brezhnikov, who was Nikolai's shoot manager. He used to book Nikolai, and I came as Johnny's manager. And Nikolai and Johnny were just so charming and warm and funny. Johnny did stand-up, and it didn't even feel like a meeting. They were telling road stories, and Aronofsky was just howling, and Scott Franklin, the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, and hours went by, and we were just having fun. And again, the meeting wrapped up, and Darren's a busy guy and he's working on other projects. I don't hear anything, maybe 7 or 8 months now. And all of a sudden I get a call and they bring me down to meet with them. They were based out of Brooklyn. Protozoa Studios is Aronofsky's studio. And they go, Evan, you're the right guy. You have the contacts, and we'd like you to be the wrestling guy, the associate producer on the film. And, I was kind of awestruck because, I'm a school teacher, and a wrestling guy. So all of a sudden, this is a major film director, Aronofsky. And we hit it off. And next thing I know, I'm doing 5 or 6 casting calls. I'm helping with the script. I'm not writing the script, but I'm looking at the wrestling end of the script. And the screenwriter's not a wrestling guy. He's a screenwriter. So, for example, in the original script, Randy the Ram is blading himself, and all of a sudden, all the wrestlers are watching. And I said, nobody would be watching. It's just another day at the office. Nobody would care. Nobody.
Right.
So that's taken out of the script, et cetera, so on. I was looking for the authenticity as far as the wrestling, and there were multiple scripts involved, as well as multiple casting calls, multiple meetings for funding. We wanted to raise $18 million which sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. It's really not. Ultimately, we got a third of that. We only got $6 million, which would have been the food budget on the Avengers or Spider-Man or whatnot.
Yep.
And a lot of times we would roll into indie cards, for example, Ring of Honor, and they were real fans. We didn't have money for a lot of extras. We didn't have a budget. It was $6 million for everything. So we're at Ring of Honor one day and we're shooting, and the fans are getting annoyed. They just want to watch their wrestling. They're not interested in what we're doing. We're interrupting their wrestling to shoot. And finally, Aronofsky actually gets in the ring, takes the mic, and says, guys, give us a little time. I just need 1 or 2 more takes and we'll be out of your way. We're going to make you proud with this film. And ultimately he did. Yeah.
Now, originally, is that true? Because I saw the training with Nicolas Cage. Was Nicolas Cage like that far along where he was going to play Randy the Ram, or was that really he just went to one kind of training thing and then that was never going to materialize?
What happened was we could not raise the money on Mickey's name, the $18 million we initially wanted. He had kind of gone direct to video, and in the 80s he was a big star, Diner and 9.5 Weeks or whatnot. I mean, major films. And so one night Aronofsky has me meet Nicolas Cage where in the garage of Hammerstein Ballroom where Ring of Honor is taping that night. So I meet Nicholas, and for about 30 seconds, I'm kind of marking out. I'm like, wow, this guy's a big movie star, powerful guy, And then I'm looking, and his clothes were, nothing fancy, and his shoes were what any other guy would be wearing. And it hits me, he's a human being like I am, like you are, and very down to earth, friendly, warm. So Aronofsky says, you're the point man, Evan. Get him backstage. No paparazzi. Just, And he was there to check out the wrestling. And at one point, he says to me, Evan, is this real? Is this like UFC? I said, no, it's wrestling. It's hard hitting. It's physical, but, it's predetermined or whatnot. And he got it. But so I'm sitting with Aronofsky, to answer your question, I'm sitting with Aronofsky after the fact, not all that long later. And he says to me, Evan, Nicholas is a great guy, but he's like a walking corporation. There's a manager, there's an agent, there's a hairdresser, et cetera, so on. And he says, Mickey's easy. He's a loner. He has one guy that helps him on the road, and he looks at me and he goes, he's the right guy. Mickey's the right guy, because he looked beaten down. He looked the part. He had a bizarre career trajectory. He's top box office, sex symbol in the 80s. Next thing you know, he's in boxing, getting punched in the face. This is not a normal film path. That he did not like the whole Hollywood system. He was a real actor. He probably would have been better off if he had gone into theater. He didn't like the whole Hollywood, star system or whatnot. And so Darren, to his credit, he's an artist, and he went with his heart. He said, Mickey is the right guy. And he proved it right. I mean, he won the Golden Globe, best actor in the world. And he was nominated for the Academy Award, but Sean Penn beat him for Milk. But you couldn't get a more devastating performance. And I said to him one night after one of the film festivals, I said, what did you think of the film? And he looks at me and he goes, I can't watch it. It reminds me of my life. That's how it really rings true that the star himself is moved and affected by it.
Right.
And,
Big time.
yeah, and we're very proud of it. 7 years from start to finish. 7 years. And people have no idea what goes into the making a movie, casting a movie, raising money for a movie, publicizing. It's really, it's almost a miracle. A movie is an idea. It starts as an idea. That's before a screenplay, before multiple revisions of a screenplay, before picking the right people and the right director, and quite importantly, the right editor. I mean, many films are made in the editing room. How many times have you heard, why is this film 3 hours? It's dragging, because the editor, didn't do what he or she should have done. So it's a team effort, boy. And I was proud to be part of it. And I don't know if you're aware, but the really sad autograph scene was based on, I took the team to a convention in New Jersey, and it was like the WWE Hall of Fame. There's Captain Lou Albano, Nikolai, Mae Young, Moolah, Superfly Snuka, Tony Atlas. I mean, Johnny Valiant, Nikolai Sheik. I mean, it was like the WWE Hall of Fame, and there's nobody there. It was empty. There were more vendors and wrestlers than fans. Let's put it that way. I mean, if there were a couple dozen people, it was a lot. It was like a graveyard, to the point Iron Sheik's head was down on the table sleeping. That's how dead this convention was. And Aronofsky, who's a good guy, I mean, his mom was a New York school teacher. He's not a rich kid or anything. He got by on talent and drive. Aronofsky kept saying to me that day, Evan, where is everybody? He felt bad. He felt sad for the wrestlers. And to make a long story short, that's put into the next version of the screenplay, the next draft of the screenplay, and shoot ahead. And I'm on set, and Aronofsky gets this smirk, and he goes, Evan, come here. And I go, yeah. Next thing I know, he says to me, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. All of a sudden, I'm an actor. I've never acted in my life. So Mickey walks over to me, whispers in my ear, he goes, just improv it very casually. I'm not a trained actor. So I do exactly what Aronofsky says. Manny Yarborough, 800-pound black sumo, legit guy. He was in UFC, early UFC. He was a friend of mine. He was one of the wrestlers, playing one of the wrestlers. And except for Johnny Valiant, who didn't look like Johnny Valiant because he had gray hair, not bleach blonde at the time. Johnny Valiant was doing the Iron Sheik deal with his head down on the table, sleeping. The rest were all, extras, actors, and I'm making my way towards Mickey or Randy, and I'm thinking the whole time, what am I going to say? Because I'm improvising it. So I get up to him, and what would I say to a legendary wrestler? And I said, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph? And he's improvising, and he looks at me, and he goes, what's your name? What's your name? And I'm thinking, and just instinctively, I go, Evan. And it dawns on me how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional film. Utterly surreal.
Yeah.
And it was one of the great experiences of my life, the entire thing. We're sitting at the New York Film Festival once it's done. And $40 a ticket, 2,300 people, sold out. And I'm sitting there, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, is looking at the screen, looking at me, looking at the screen, looking at me. And she goes, that's you. It's like surreal, because I didn't edit the film. I didn't know if I was going to make the cut or not. And as I'm sitting there, the scene where Randy the Ram says to his daughter, I'm just a broken down piece of meat. I look around, and everybody's crying. Everybody's crying. And we had worked on this off and on for 7 years. And I say to myself, it works. This works. You can't fake crying. And it was just, the whole thing was beautiful. And the film ends, the credits roll, spontaneous standing ovation. And as we leave, this is Lincoln Center, gorgeous, world-class venue. As we leave Lincoln Center, paparazzi are out. And they're, Evan, can we take your picture? Evan, can we interview you? And, the day before, I'm a school teacher, in front of a classroom. And, it feels like the Academy Awards. It's one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, the New York Film Festival. And I tell people it was the greatest night of my life. And what Aronofsky did for me, putting me in that film, was a gift, because 100, 200, 300 years from now, because of Mickey's performance, people will still watch that film. And he was brilliant and from the heart, that guy. And a good guy. I never saw him say no to an autograph, a picture from a fan. Good guy. Tortured artist in his own way, like I said, but, brilliant actor.
Crazy that year, right? Didn't Gran Torino come out that year? I mean, there was a bunch of other good movies that came out in that year too. So
Sean Penn beat him for Milk that year. And Hollywood likes, a role like that. Mickey's was more raw. Milk was great, and then Sean Penn is great. So, it is what it is. But he did win the Golden Globe. That's best actor in the entire world. That says a lot. Yeah.
It was great. I even like Ernest the Cat Miller as like the heel, or the lead villain there. That was great too.
It's funny because he was one guy I did not bring in. He came in with his own agent, and it was interesting casting for the Ayatollah role. I went to the original Sheik's son, who was alive at the time, the original Sheik out of Detroit. I went to Johnny Rods, who played Java Rourke in L.A. He played a Sheik gimmick. I was trying to think of Sheik characters. Johnny Rods, this is a funny story. So I go down to Gleason's gym, where Johnny Rods still teaches. He's in his 80s. And likable guy. And I'm like, Johnny, we're casting for a major film not far from here. Gleason's gym is in Brooklyn. Protozoa Studios is in Brooklyn. And I said, would you like to come down and read? It's a major part. It's the lead villain, the lead heel in the film. And he goes, I'm in the wrestling business 50 years. Why would I have to read for something? He didn't get it. He just didn't get it, because he's thinking like a wrestler. He's not thinking as an actor, So that was an opportunity Johnny did not grab, unfortunately. But Ernest Miller was great. I was thinking guys who were legit, Arab descent or played Arab wrestlers. That was my logic as a wrestling guy. But I never thought of Ernest Miller, but he knocked it out of the park. So much respect. Yeah.
Crazy to think like they could make a wrestling movie, but make it so good, the acting be so superb. You know what I mean? Like old school wrestling movies, you would think like, oh, it's like a B movie, or it's a little bit cheesy, or they're going to do something corny with the actors, or it's going to be totally for kids or something. They really made it such like a great film.
Aronofsky is a true artist. Literally for 6 months, every single weekend, I took him to the lowest level indie shows with 12 people in the audience, to Ring of Honor, to Johnny Valiant's one-man comedy show, to wrestling conventions, anything wrestling related. I took them every weekend, and Aronofsky would go into the dressing room and pick King Kong Bundy's brain and pick Nikolai Volkov's brain, etc., so on. And he wanted it to ring true. I mean, he even had Mickey hanging out with Greg Valentine because he wanted, that kind of legendary old school wrestler to rub off on him. And so it was an interesting experience because I looked at everything as a wrestling fan, wrestling historian, wrestling agent, etc., so on. Darren, of course, looked at things cinematically. So, for example, I brought in Teddy the Tank Reed, who was Cassius in the Master P's No Limit Soldiers, and massive guy, massive, and and a nice guy. And so I bring him in, and Darren's like, Evan, he's too big. He's going to dwarf Mickey. I don't want Mickey to not look like a wrestler, So I bring in lowlife Louis Ramos to read for the hardcore part, that Necro Butcher eventually played. And very charismatic guy and energy off the charts and great. But Darren said, Evan, he's too small. I want somebody imposing for that scene. So then I kept saying to Darren, bring in Nigel McGuinness. He's as good as anybody in the world at that time, circa, I'm talking 2006, 2007. It came out in 2008. Nigel was ROH champ and tremendous, tremendous wrestler. And he didn't think Nigel looked the part, and he ended up going with Romeo Roselli, who had like the body of a Greek god. So my point being, I'm looking at it one way, he's looking at it cinematically, what's going to be dramatic on the screen. And also the business end of things was interesting. He would sit there with the actors' information on index cards, little index cards. And he would say to me, Evan, for the price of one movie star, I could get 3 TV stars. When you have like a tiny budget, this is important. Who could you actually afford to do this? And none of us got rich from it. It was a $6 million indie film, but man, are we ever proud of it? And Mickey's performance, I compare it to Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront. When Mickey says, I'm just a broken down piece of meat, Brando's famous line was, I could have been a contender. And it's heartbreaking. And 75 years later or whatnot, people still remember that line. And that's my point. I mean, the screenplay, the acting, it'll stand the test of time.
Is he supposed to be Greg the Hammer Valentine? Like looking at it?
No, it's like a composite. These guys, Darren and Scott Franklin, the executive producer, even the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, they're all 50-ish. They were weaned on the mid-'80s, Hulkamania, rock and wrestling, era wrestling. They weren't as involved as somebody like myself, but they were big fans, and they had this idea for this screenplay and project. And so, they're thinking of a lot of guys from that era. And but Greg happened to be available and spent a lot of time with Mickey, and it rubbed off on him. And Greg's a friend of mine. He's 75 or so years old at this point. You wouldn't want to get this guy angry. He's a tough guy, legit.
Oh, yeah.
Nice guy. I'll tell you a funny Greg Valentine story. I tell this in my book. He's crashing on my sofa one day. I would book him for autograph appearances. I live in an apartment building. We walk out of the apartment, and all of a sudden, a car in traffic screeches on a dime, skids, and the guy gets out of the car, goes like this. He goes, "You're Greg Valentine." The guy stops in traffic, and all the traffic's behind them, halted. And Greg Valentine looks at the driver and goes, "Yes, I am. Yes, I am." So it's an adventure being on the road with these guys, and they're larger than life. Johnny Valiant, who was an actor and comedian and did theater and whatnot, he used to say, Evan, guys like Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, they put on a baseball cap, some sunglasses, they walk down the street, nobody notices them. He says wrestlers are larger than life. If Greg Valentine walks down the street, people are going to notice them. If Hulk Hogan walks down the street, people are going to. Some of these guys are just huge compared to the average person. I'm 6'2", 210. I'm not a little kid, but these guys are huge to me. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with like the wrestler, right? Obviously, he's got to take bumps. He's got to physically be able to do the movie too. That was no problem for him, I guess.
Like everything, the truth is somewhere in the middle. He did have a stunt double. I brought in a stunt double, Kid USA, local indie wrestler who bore a strong resemblance to him. He did do some of the wrestling, much of the wrestling, Mickey, to the point where he got hurt at one point. We were worried. He actually, he was 50-ish at the time, not a kid. So Afa and his team trained Mickey, and Afa was a lovely guy. Everybody loved that guy, and they hit it off. And yeah, Mickey's a tough guy. I mean, like I said, he went into boxing, so he wasn't scared to get physical. That was not an issue whatsoever. One of the reasons Darren didn't go with Nicolas Cage is he said, quote, he looks too healthy. He looks too healthy, for the part. At the time, Nicolas Cage was, mid-40s, and he was in good shape. And Mickey looked the part and was the part, and ultimately it worked. And that's what mattered. That's what mattered.
With you and wrestling, were you always a fan? Like, were you always into it? Like, or no?
No, I'll tell you. I tell the story in my book. I'm living in East Flatbush, Brooklyn as a kid, and it's a rainy, nasty day, much like this winter has been here in New York. And I discover the UHF dial. It actually had a big U on it. And I'm like, what is this? I never used this thing. I'm so bored. I'm in the house all day. It's not like back in the 70s you had cable or internet or video games, nothing. So I'm literally turning this UHF dial, and there's some PBS stations, there's some foreign language stations, and all of a sudden, I see this monstrous guy pounding on this American Indian. And I'm like, what is this? And it was pro wrestling. It was Chief Jay Strongbow, getting pounded on. And I'm a kid. I think it's real. My eyes are like this. What, And all of a sudden, Strongbow, who is very charismatic, makes this herky-jerky war dance. And he starts chopping the guy. And all of a sudden, he beats the much bigger, heavier guy. And I'm like, wow. And I'm watching the rest of the show, and I make a mental note. When is this on? Oh, such and such a time, such and such a station. And I start watching it religiously. And then maybe 2 years later, it's 1974. I could tell you the date, June 24th, 1974. This is in my book as well. My dad takes me to Madison Square Garden. I'm a kid. And I walk into the garden. The first thing that goes into my mind, I couldn't make this up. I go, wow, it's in color. Because we had a black and white TV. It's in color. It was like I was Dorothy in Oz. I had just Oz. And it's like my brain is like blown. And it's like Marvel superheroes and villains. There's Killer Kowalski, Haystacks Calhoun, the Valiant Brothers, Bruno. For the young fans today who go, I don't get Bruno, he just punched and kicked. He would walk down the aisle. There was no pyro. There was no entrance music. He wore a black pair of tights generally. And the building would shake on sheer charisma. And we loved the guy. He was like Saint Bruno to us. And people don't understand. This is literally 50 years ago, 1974, and 50 and a half years ago. And we're marks. We're total marks. And every time, the first match was Nikolai and Fred Blassie against Bruno and Strongbow. And every time Bruno's getting punched, kicked, choked, we're feeling it because we think it's real. And people don't understand, Bruno, Pedro, Strongbow, Monsoon. It's like, yeah, they did a lot of punching and kicking, but the charisma was off the charts. And the Valiant brothers had dropped from another planet. Like nobody looked like them, talked like them. Ditto superstar Billy Graham. This is before you had a gym on every second corner. Most Americans did not look like superstar Billy Graham. And he's like a cross between Gorgeous George, Muhammad Ali, and, the promos. Yeah, Billy Graham was not Nick Bockwinkel or Dory Funk or Jack Briscoe or Harley Race, but the charisma was unbelievable. This guy could have read the phone book and, we would have been riveted. And we did a documentary, 350 Days, and Billy Graham and Bret Hart were the stars. Billy Graham, just the charisma was unbelievable at the time. And Hogan and Ventura and Austin Idol and God knows how many others, that was Billy Graham, believe me. Not that Billy Graham didn't borrow also. He took a little Muhammad Ali, but Billy Graham was an original. And when Billy Graham and Bruno would meet at Madison Square Garden, and I was there for those matches, the building would literally shake. And the Garden was sold out, approximately 22,000. The Felt Forum on closed circuit, the adjoining building was sold out, another 4,000 or 5,000. So you had 27,000 or so people paying month after month to see Bruno and Billy Graham. And, the spin today, Vince took it out of bingo halls and VFWs. I mean, Madison Square Garden wasn't a bingo hall, nor was the Philadelphia Spectrum, Boston Garden, etc. Right. So on. Yeah. I mean, so, they're kind of rewriting history a bit also. Yes, they did have small shows in high schools and VFWs and stuff, and that was great. You go to a high school and there's Roddy Piper or Billy Graham or somebody, and you're 2 feet away from them, and you meet them and get autographs and pictures. That's nothing to look down on. Those were some great memories for fans of that era.
Do you think that with superstar Billy Graham, they should have kept the title on him longer? Because that's always like the point of contention.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Billy Graham used to team with Ivan Koloff regularly. And one main event was Bruno and his faux cousin, Tony Parisi, against Billy Graham and Ivan Koloff. And what Ivan Koloff and Billy Graham would do mid-matches, they would get into a little argument with each other and start shoving each other. And 100% of the crowd was cheering for Billy Graham because, back then it was the Cold War. The Russians were going to nuke us. And, James Bond was always From Russia with Love and fighting it was a different time. And the fans would have totally... And he was like the cool heel. Guys like him, Piper, Randy Savage, even the Valiants to a degree. Those were the cool heels. And the fans would have supported Billy Graham as a face champion. But Vince Sr. had committed to Backlund, and he was a man of his word. And he was dealing with other promoters and such. And he went with this promise that on February 20th, 1978, because I was there also, Backlund would beat Graham for the title. And for us Billy Graham fans, it was not a wonderful night. But I'll tell you, it's interesting with Backlund because I think history to a certain degree has not been kind to him. Backlund, when he was in with the right guy, a wrestler, not a big ponderous, super heavyweight, but a wrestler. For example, Ken Patera, Adrian Adonis, Bob Orton Jr., etc., so on. When he was in there with somebody who could wrestle, Bill Eadie, Mass Superstar, he had some great matches. Ivan Koloff and Backlund, Morocco and Backlund, great matches. Backlund wasn't good with the 300-pound older lumbering, Bulldog Brower types. He just couldn't carry guys like that. Ric Flair could pretty much work with anybody as NWA champion and make it work. Backlund, was better with the technicians. Best Backlund match I ever saw was him and Adrian Adonis. That was like a clinic. I saw Backlund and Harley Race at the Garden, NWA versus WWF title, and that was something, really special. And Backlund kind of got a bad rap. A lot of people just dismiss him. Oh, he didn't have charisma, or he was boring. No, with the right, him and Patera, some people had it as match of the year. So, history sometimes isn't kind, and a lot of younger fans, they kind of have their spin, and they weren't there. Bruno couldn't wrestle. Flair had the same match every night. No, he didn't. I would go down to Philly to see the NWA every month. Flair and Ricky Steamboat was wrestling elevated to art. Flair and El Gigante wasn't. It wasn't the same match. You can't tell me you had the same match every night. It's absurd. Flair and Barry Windham was unbelievable. Flair and a big muscle guy, a Lex Luger type, not quite as great, So it is what it is.
Backlund too. Him and Valentine had some good ones.
I was there. They had a 1-hour draw one night. Then they had one match where the pin was in dispute. So they held up the title in New York for a month. They said neither of these guys are champion. And they came back next month, and Backlund, of course, beat him. But Prime Greg Valentine was amazing. He was as great as anybody. Prime Morocco, Prime Slaughter, from like 80 to 85. Valentine was in a little earlier, late 70s. Pat Patterson was amazing. I loved the WWWF, later the WWF, until around 86, 87, when they kind of jumped the shark. It became very kiddie show and silly gimmicks. But even the heel Piper era, Piper would blow the roof off the Garden. It was unbelievable. Piper would come out, he'd wrestle Snooker or team with Bob Orton Jr. And it was like chaos. He's in the ring, he's out of the ring, he's eye gouging, he's throwing chairs, they're brawling, they're bleeding. And then it was over and you could breathe again. It was like, that's how exciting heel Roddy Piper was that era. And as an old school fan, it hurt me when Vince really turned it into a cartoon, which doesn't mean, Bret Hart was great, and Shawn Michaels was great, and DiBiase was great. There were plenty of great guys, but just the presentation had changed so much that I really lost my love for it, and I started going to NWA shows instead. And when they went corporate, WCW, they weren't the same either. They were a shell of what they were too. Yeah.
Are you still a fan today? Do you still watch current wrestling?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually when I'm critical of, for example, I watched Saturday Night Main Event the other night, and I said, what a disgrace that you have a guy like Gunther, who's a great wrestler, old school, tremendous wrestler, and twice in the middle of his match, you're cutting to lengthy commercial breaks and totally interrupting the flow of it. But you savor every moment of Jey Uso walking to the ring. So somehow the walk to the ring is more important than the brilliant wrestler you have wrestling in the ring. And I think that's a legitimate criticism. My wife is Korean. I was in Seoul, Korea, and I was watching wrestling on TV. And they treat it with respect. They treat it like boxing or UFC. There's a bunch of commercials before the match, a bunch of commercials after the match. If Muhammad Ali's fighting Joe Frazier, you wouldn't cut to a commercial. I mean, you're supposed to respect these guys as athletes, and great athletes they are. So I think Gunther's great. I think Cody Rhodes is great. I think Reigns on the right night when it's not all shtick and outside interference, he could be great. Asuka, Charlotte Flair. In AEW, Ospreay, I think, is best in the world. I think Ospreay's amazing. Kenny Omega, Swerve Strickland. I like the Luchadors. It's funny. A lot of the fans will go, how could you like that Lucha Libre? They're all standing outside the ring waiting for the guy to jump on them. So I'm like, but you okay with The Undertaker rising from the dead? You okay with Kane? That's not suspension of disbelief. The guy jumping over the top rope, you have a problem with that. I mean, so that's a long-winded answer to yes, I still enjoy wrestling. I was at Ring of Honor Final Battle at the Hammerstein. I always loved Ring of Honor, and I think Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson, circa 2008 or so, I think those matches were Dory Funk, Jack Briscoe, Flash Steamboat level masterpieces. I hate they're all just spot monkeys. It's like, no, the wrestling has changed. I think Okada and Kenny Omega were masterpieces in Japan. And if somebody doesn't like it, maybe it's on them. Maybe it's going over their head. They don't appreciate it. But what I don't want to see is a 3-hour Raw where there's 45 minutes of wrestling and everything's about the entrances, the stilted scripted promos, the commercials. I want to watch wrestling, not sports alleged entertainment. Sometimes I'll watch a WWE premium live event and I'm numb by the middle of it, just numb. And then all of a sudden, Gunther will come out and have a great match, or Cody will, or somebody else. And I'm like, okay, this is why I watch it, for that 1 or 2 or 3, excellent wrestling matches. But I'm not going to Madison Square Garden. This is interesting. The last show was 63 to 1,011 a ticket, and it was half empty. It's half empty. I think they've reached the point where they've gotten too greedy. There was 11,000 in the Backlund, Graham, Bruno era. You would never draw 11,000. The place was jammed with people. Billy Graham wrestled Peter Maivia. They drew 17,000, and they were complaining it was a lousy crowd. They used to draw 22, sold out or nearly sold out 12 to 14 times a year. Now they're coming in 3, 4, 5 times a year, and it's so wildly overpriced that some people can't afford it. I'm hearing more and more people. I hate to say no to my kids, but do the math. Even at $63 a ticket, mom, dad, and 2 kids, plus parking and gimmicks and food, you're looking at a $500 evening, easy. Not everybody has it. So originally it was a blue collar crowd. Now they have, at the next WrestleMania coming up in 2 or 3 months, they have $50,000 VIP packages. $50,000. What could possibly warrant that? They're going to give you a chair to take home? I mean, it's absurd. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it.
Yeah, sometimes some of those prices are crazy. I don't know who the heck can afford it. You know what I mean? It's just getting out of hand.
The ticket prices for WrestleMania, not the VIP packages, the actual ticket price is $450 to $10,000. $10,000. What could possibly warrant that? If I saw the best match I've ever seen in my life, it still wouldn't warrant $10,000. It's crazy.
I remember back in '99 for WrestleMania in Philly, I had first row tickets. They were $400, and we thought that was nuts. And this is Austin versus The Rock, first row. You know what I mean? So crazy. We thought that was like we got to keep the chair and all this other stuff, but still, we thought that was a ton back then.
$400 isn't 10,000. 10,000.
No, 10,000 is nuts. That's crazy.
So the corporate apologists do well, you know what the market will bear. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe at the next press scrum when Triple H boasts about the record-breaking gate because the prices are obscene and record-breaking, the prices, maybe they should set up a fund, take 1% or half of 1% of the billions of dollars they have. So guys like, and this is a real list, Superstar Billy Graham, Virgil, and Bushwhacker Butch all needed GoFundMes at the end. Hospital bills, to be buried, etc. Guys like Paul Orndorff needed GoFundMes, Kamala to save their houses. It's disgraceful. It's utterly disgraceful. And the fans, before I go to the fans, how about pensions, 401ks, health insurance for these guys? They wrestled 300 plus days for you. What more do you need to be an employee? Okay. The movie 350 Days, we titled it because the NWA champs would wrestle 350 days. 350 days. Greg Valentine told us at his peak he wrestled 320 days a year. Bret Hart said 330 days a year. What do you need to be an employee and warrant benefits? So how about you take care of these guys? The NFL set up a fund for their legends and pioneers. Take care of these guys. And for the fans who do they all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and song, you're clueless. You're clueless. Because before Hulkamania, before Rock and Wrestling, most of these main event guys, even in WWWF, never broke 100,000. Bruno did, the champs did, but guys like Johnny Valiant, the Valiant Brothers, #1 tag team in the world, he never broke 100 grand as a wrestler. You're on the road 300 plus days a year, sending money back to your family, paying your own health insurance, paying road expenses every day, 3 meals a day, hotels, gear, injuries. You have no, So, no, they didn't all piss away fortunes. And, some of these guys are 500 wrestling books and 5,000 shoot interviews in. They still don't quite get it because they weren't out there. And these guys wrestled hurt because they were scared to lose their spot. You're wrestling 300 plus days a year. Believe me, there's going to be times you're in pain, you're hurt. And it wasn't the kind of job where you could go, boss, I need a week off. It's like tape it up, take some painkillers, do what you have to do, get out there. I'll tell you a crazy story. True story. Valiant Brothers are wrestling. Jimmy pulls out a blade. And, it's hectic in the ring. He accidentally nicks Johnny in the eyeball. Not in the eye, in the eyeball. Okay? Johnny's blind in one eye, middle of a match in a packed arena. And that's how tough these guys are. He finishes the match. He didn't run back to the dressing room. Then the next day, he wrestled blind in one eye. Then finally, he calls Vince Sr. Vince, I got to take care of this. I'm blind in one eye. And, so the fans don't quite get what these guys went through. And many of them, there's a long trail of dead before their time wrestlers, some who were my friends. And, the corporate apologists might want to do a little more research and have a little more human empathy and not, Triple H is on my good list and, take care of these guys. Take care of them.
So I totally agree. Definitely. Now, as we hit the wind down here, we head towards the finish. As far as the book is concerned, wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets, Give us just a little bit of a teaser or a push of why everybody should get it and where they can get it.
Okay. During COVID, I sat down. During the COVID years, I sat down and wrote 100+ stories about my careers in wrestling, filmmaking, and teaching. And it's a mix of much of that, including never before stories about the making of the wrestler. There's an entire chapter, multiple stories, how we made that film. And the book is from the heart. I bury a lot of ghosts, a lot of lost friends in this book. Nikolai, the Sheik, Johnny Valiant, Killer Kowalski, Nicole Bass, Melissa Coates. These were all friends. Melissa Coates was at my wedding. If you don't know her, she was a female bodybuilding champion, and she had a brief run in the WWE also. Yeah, it's from the heart. There's some funny stories. There's some tragic stories. There's poignant, but and Lanny Poffo. Lanny Poffo was a dear friend, and there's a piece on him in there. He would sleep on my couch, and he was a health nut. I mean, nuts, seeds. We were shocked when he was gone at 68 years old, and he was like family. And to make a long story short, I tell people, guys like Lanny, who started in the 70s, he wrestled in smoke-filled arenas. Every night you're in a different time zone, different airplane, it's just not a career that's conducive to longevity, no matter how well you take care of yourself. And he took care of himself. So in this book, it's not about angles. It's not about particular matches, except for the Morocco snooker match where Snooker jumped off the cage in Morocco. I was there. I tell that story because that was just unbelievable sitting there. It's really about these men and women as human beings and what they went through and sacrificed. And wrestlers hate the word fake. They hate the word fake. They go, my shoulder replacement wasn't fake. My 3 divorces weren't fake. My kids not talking to me because I was away 300+ days a year isn't fake. And wrestlers will say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain. Always. Gravity isn't fake. Those bumps they took, thousands and thousands of bumps for decades, decade after decade, it takes its toll. It really takes its toll. And I honor these friends, and I miss these friends, and I tell these stories and their stories. And I think people that love the wrestling business, and even non-wrestling fans, I think they'll be moved by it because there's some stuff in there. Are you familiar with Gordon Schizzeri, the AWF promoter?
Yeah, a little bit, yes. Yeah. I remember AWF pretty well with Tito and everybody.
Yeah. Gordon Schizzeri burned through 2 inheritances and ended up dying in a welfare hotel. And there's stories like that in there. Really, things you don't read about in the wrestling business so much. There's always a fixation on how many titles did the guy have and this angle and that angle. This is coming from a whole different place. And I think the readers will at least the people who have interests beyond the minutia, will appreciate it because it's from the heart, and some of it is heartbreaking and some of it's inspirational. I mean, some of the wrestlers would say to me, Evan, I saw the world on the promoter's dime. I was just a poor kid from this inner city or whatnot, and I traveled the world on the promoter's dime. And no matter how hard it was, no matter how painful it was, no matter how many injuries, some of them would say, I do it all over again. I do it all over again. So if you're interested, it's wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets. You can get it on Amazon. You can look up my social media. I'm easy enough to find. I'm on Facebook. I also have Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. I'm the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. We have a podcast, Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. Another film I did, I'll just plug this for a second. It's called Wrestling Then and Now, and also a bunch of my friends, Killer Kowalski, Don Arnold, Nikolai Volkov, Homicide of all people, he's in it. That was done like 2003 or so. Yeah, it's like almost 25 years old. And again, a lot of the people in that film are gone now. So it's nice to honor them. And that's on Tubi. You can watch it for free. It's, I have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling. And when you read the book, you'll see why. And, but wrestling has taken me to some amazing places and met some amazing people and friends. And when a Nikolai Volkov or a Jimmy Valiant or a Johnny Valiant or a Lanny Poffo called me when my mom died, it meant a lot. It really meant a lot because these are friends and heroes, you know, and so that's basically my spiel.
All right. Evan, thank you so much for all the time tonight. I implore everybody to go out there and get that book. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the time tonight.
Thank you for your support, and you do a great job. I appreciate it. I wouldn't have enjoyed sitting here running down every angle on Raw or SmackDown or Collision or Dynamite. So you do a good job. Thank you. Thank you.